The Muscatine City Council will come to order. Greg, would you perform a roll call, please?
Councilmember Spread.
Present.
Phillips.
Present.
Bynum.
Present.
Shahade.
Present.
Natvig. Fitzgerald.
Present.
And Raywalt.
Present.
6 present, 1 absent, Your Honor.
Very good, Greg. Thank you. And we'll begin this evening with a presentation from our Blue Zones Director, Tony Axel.
Thank you, Mayor. Joni Axel, 208 West 2nd Street, and I'm here representing the Blue Zones Project. I am here to give you the status report I've done quite often, Council, and this time there are 2 or 3 new chapters, so I'll try to be brief on this. As you probably know, or maybe you haven't actually have an indelible memory of it, but there was a certification review of our whole community on June 24th and June 25th. I am here to report that our community was ready to be visited, and we were shining all over the place. I have to say to you that none of our sectors was more really ready and had more to say that we were proud of than the city of Muscatine. So thank you all for your support, and thank you all to the staff and all those who had something to do with that. That kind of, if you just drill down on what does that really mean, it means that there have been some projects undertaken with good planning and enormous amounts of what I would say kind of courage. I think, as I promised you the very first time I came here, there weren't a lot of extra efforts with hands out for more money. I think you're glad about that. I don't know what the future may hold, but hang on. We actually have had tremendous success with thinking up new ways to have healthy choices in Muscatine, Iowa, with some healthy living options, and to make our city just more livable and lovable. So I think that you should all feel very proud about that. As you know, we believe the city has been a great partner. I need you to know that's verified from other communities in Iowa. There are 15 communities that are Blue Zones designated and then certified is to come. And of those 15 communities, probably 3 or 4 of them at least have asked us, what magic we had to work with our cities, our city and our city people and the city staff. And I said, oh, it wasn't any magic, it came to us. And then the next thing that probably would be on your mind is not only was the city really nice to work with, but we found that I think that our whole community became much more engaged as months went on, and that just reflects in a lot of different ways. Engagement means, first recognition that the Blue Zones Project, first what it is, and secondly what options are available, and how things like trails and things like connecting the schools with streets and trails and paths and those kinds of things make people feel really quite proud of the city, as well as making things very useful for individuals. I think we'll see one of the biggest changes out on Colorado Street. So it just kind of connects a whole part of the city. I'm going to be brief because, well, I'm sure you'll have another report, but what does the future hold? The Blue Zones Project is not coming to a screeching halt at all. It continues in Muscatine. It has a continuing updated blueprint of both actions and expectations and hopes. Jody Hansen will be the lead, the Blue Zones Project lead, beginning August 1st, and she will have her home in the chamber offices, and will be dedicated, and her job will be to continue on with all of our Blue Zones undertakings, our sector achievements, continuing designations of work sites and restaurants and others. We have people in work sites and restaurants that are calling us now because they too would like to become Blue Zones designated sectors in parts of those sectors in our city. The project will continue under the leadership of a steering committee, which will include many of the places in the city that kind of need to help us keep the ball rolling, not only the city, but also the schools, the medical community, and there will be representatives in a small group that will continue to keep the Blue Zones Project on. That will be sort of the steering committee. Then there will be also assistance in, not dedicated staff, but helpful staff, both from the medical community, Trinity, Unity Point, City of Muscatine, and also United Way will continue to contribute a volunteer coordinator. So there is sustainability in place, and I'm only saying that because on July 31st, our office will not be in the Plural Plaza anymore. So the Blue Zones will be found over at GMCCI, and we'll get to all of you two wonderful things. One is a complete contact list for those of us who will be no longer in place, but still volunteers and Blue Zones teammates. And the second thing we'll get to you is a wonderful invitation to come to a celebration. So, and we don't know if we're going to be certified, but we believe we were so shiny we can't help but be certified. But we don't have that word yet, but we're going to have a celebration on July 29th at 5 o'clock. That's a Thursday. And I'd love for you to ask me some questions. I never really cover everything when I'm up here. Anybody have any questions? Mayor.
Joni, what happens to you and Andrew Anderson and the rest of your staff?
I'm not
August
telling
1st?
Mayor. What happens to me is this was my encore job, and I knew it was a short one, 18 months to be exact, and it's turning out to be more like 16 months. We will not be employed by Healthways, which is our current employer, which is, again, is a publicly traded company and is helping the state of Iowa get this project underway. We will not have official assignments. We will have lots of unofficial assignments. I'll probably be over in the wings somewhere where old senior advisor types go. And I'm hoping for Andrew Anderson that he chooses among 3 or 4 opportunities he has on his desk to continue work either with the Blue Zones or with the City of Muscatine or both. So I can't speak for that right now, but I'm certainly not going anywhere. I've tried Florida, no thanks. So I'll be here. But I don't have another encore position at this moment under consideration. In fact, I told somebody if I take another job, just push me over the cliff.
Well, I think you've done an awesome job with the Blue Zones since you were instilled in that position, so.
Thank you.
Council?
I just can't imagine Joni sitting back in the corner and being a wallflower. It's just
Hey, I'm pretty good at construction, Phil.
good. I hope so. I'll hire you.
Well, it will be hard for all of us to miss people like Steve Boca, who's been very helpful, and many of your other staff, and I know we have a new person there too, but you've been wonderful, and I would maybe say that you won't see me here as much. You will see a reporter, either Jody or Greg Jenkins or someone will be keeping you up to date for sure. And who knows, I might just pop in over there in my seat in front of Devin. So thanks a lot. Thanks for everything. Please just enjoy the celebration and look for the future. I don't think any of the engines are turned off. We're just jiggering it around a little bit.
Great.
Okay.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joni. Okay, item number 3 on tonight's agenda, City Code Review of Titles 1, 2, 8, and 9. That would be Greg and Nancy, I guess.
And Steve's going to chime in for chapters 8 and 9. Our plan is to go line by line and keep you here for another 3 hours.
Sure you are.
No. Here's our plan. Our plan is to give you a brief introduction to the major changes for each chapter, turn it over to you, take the next month. If you have questions that come up, send them our way, and then we will answer those questions at the next in-depth session. And then at that next in-depth session, after we've done that, we will highlight the major changes in the next set of chapters, let you take another month to digest those, and so on and so forth until we're complete. So tonight, I'm just going to run through, and Steve and I are going to run through the major changes in chapters 1, 2, 8, and 9, answer any questions you might have from that, and then let you digest it over the next month and come back. So if you have questions, shoot those to me, and then we'll answer those in a public forum. So just kind of a real quick introduction. With the code we've been working on for 18 months or so. It's been a rather laborious process, but I think we've got a pretty good product for you tonight. Part of the goal was to shorten the code, cite the state code where possible. We have an appendix that will be forthcoming, and a fine and fee schedule that will be forthcoming as a comprehensive document as part of the code, and then the council will be able to update just that piece by resolution going forward once the code has been adopted. So I'm going to jump into Title I just briefly. Titles 1 and 2 are pretty basic chapters, and in every case we've tried to condense where possible, cite state code where possible, rather than having to amend the code every time the state code changes. And at the end of the day, you will have a PDF document up on the city's code with links within the document that may link to you to another section within the code or to the state code. So it makes it very easy to read and digest as you go through it or answer your questions. Major changes in Title I, legal description of the city boundaries has been updated. Wards no longer are spelled out but have a legal description. Municipal infraction, a general section on municipal infractions has been added to this section. There are specific municipal infractions, many of which are in Steve's portions, but we have a general municipal infractions adoption section that's been added actually to the code in this portion. Elections have been updated to include or to become current with state code. Let's see, the mayor and council sections have been separated into individual sections, as well as the mayor pro tem section, which cites state code. The fiscal management section has been updated to meet state code. And if you may recall, in the personnel section, we listed out several portions of the handbook. Well, the council adopts a handbook separately, not every year, but at least every other year. So rather than list that out in the code, that portion has been extracted from the code and noted there as the council adopts that on a regular basis outside of the city code. And rather than have the cost and expenditure to update it each time the city, the policy is updated, that's simply been extracted from the code. If you may recall as well, I jumped into boards and commissions, which is Title II. And boards and commissions was rather outdated. We had numerous boards or commissions that were no longer utilized by the city. So the ones that are in the code now are presently in use by the city. There was roughly 11 boards that have been removed. The Pension Board, Board of Health, Cable Television Advisory Committee, Human Rights, New Construction Appeal Advisory, Plumber Board, Transportation Advisory Commission, ones that have not been in use for a number of years. However, we did add a section whereby the mayor and council can add ad hoc or committees or task force as the need arises. So there are provisions in which to address issues that may come up. And that's really kind of the short and sweet review of Title II, which dealt with boards and commissions. Steve, you want to jump into 8 and 9?
Did you list specifically in here what commissions are,
Removed?
well, what are still in play?
Yes,
intact?
they're all listed within Title II.
Really?
Chapter 1 is the Airport Commission, Chapter 2 is the Civil Service Commission. Each chapter is a board. There will be an appendix compiled at the end of this process.
Okay.
Sorry.
Good evening. I left a couple of notes there, so I'm just making a couple more quick. Greg hit on several of the major points that I think will be a constant theme throughout the codification of the code, and that is that where we have the ability to refer to state code. We intend to do so in an effort to reduce the volume from this much to maybe this much, and be able to toggle between links to the state code where it's appropriate and back into the document. I think the user will find that a lot better. The other thing that'll be a consistent theme as you review all of these chapters is that there'll be a reference to an appendice for whether it's fines and forfeitures or permit fees or license fees, et cetera, so that if you're in those particular sections of the code, it will be able to, I think the plan is to have that also be toggled and take you directly back to those sections, so you're not running through the code book looking for those kinds of charges and fees and those kinds of things will all be readily available to you as you move forward. I've done most of the ones for the Community Development Department, and I'll touch on Title 8, which is largely the building regulation portion of the city code. And it covers actually 10 or 11 chapters. The first one is the adoption of the building code. One of the things we have done is convert to the international family of construction codes. And rather than in the ordinance adopt them specifically by date, which would then require us to come back each time a new version is adopted for another ordinance change, we have adopted a theme of adopting the most recent edition, and that is based on the same standard that the state of Iowa is using. So what we're adopting is consistent with what the state of Iowa is trying to do. And then it gives us the flexibility to adopt local amendments to those codes, and I'll touch on that in just a minute for you. But so you'll see that throughout this where we can take advantage of those repetitive type of things. Building permits, it goes through the building permits in Title I and the adoption of the code. Title II that's our demolition section of the code, deals with when you could do it, how you do it. You got to have a bond, the permits, approvals, those kinds of things. It walks you through that process. 3 is actually the adoption of the electric code. That is the only exception to the building codes and the mechanical codes, et cetera, it is not an international model. It's based on the National Electric Code, which was promulgated by NFPA, or National Fire Protection Association. Always has been, always will be. But that's the exception to the code family that we adopt. And there are local amendments to that, but most of them are consistent with what we've had over the year. There's no major changes proposed to that. Chapter 4 is a fuel gas code. That might be a little interesting, because I think if you look in our code today, it says we adopt the 1959 one or whatever is there. So we are coming out of the dark ages and we've consulted with Alliant Energy to make sure that we have the one that they want us to work with them during their efforts in town too. So that reflects, after collaboration with them, that code that they use as well. Chapter 5 is arguably one of the longer sections of the code, excluding the zoning ordinance and some of the other ones. But this is the housing code, and it deals with the meat and potatoes for how we handle and administer the housing code and the regular rental inspection program. That, as you know, was mandated by the 69th Assembly in '81, and we adopted a code, and it's been amended a few times since then. This pulls all that together, all the legalese, the appeals, and all the other issues. There aren't major changes in this. Most of those are driven. The only changes that are in here, maybe you have some court precedent that's been set, those kinds of things, and we've pulled those in. Again, where we can refer to specific state law, we have done so rather than be repetitive in the code. But you will see a number of them highlighted when you review your documents, referring to the appendice and the schedule of permits and fees. Again, that's why. After that section, the housing code, comes a house numbering section. We do have an ordinance that covers how we number buildings in town based on a grid system. That grid system still functions. We just continue it on out as we grow. It was done in the 70s, but it's still applicable today. And there are size requirements for where those numbers are posted, et cetera. So that delineates those requirements. Number 7 is the adoption of the mechanical code, chapter 7. Number 8 is moving buildings. If you move buildings throughout the community, it tells you what you need to do, what processes you have to use to get approval, and obviously you folks get involved. If it uses city streets, it has to come to you. You probably recall seeing those a time or two where we've moved buildings. Then we have the adoption of the plumbing code, which is 9. We have housing. We have the rental housing registration is another chapter in this body. And the reason we have that in there, frankly, is that the state mandated that the city adopt one of the 5 model codes and enforce it and provide for regular inspection, but they did not tell us how we're to develop that list. So this was adopted early on and with the adoption of the housing code that we require landlords or property owners to register their rental properties with the city only for the purpose of facilitating the required inspection program. So that database is maintained in our office. That's it on the Title 8, which is the building regulations. It's, again, if you have any comments, if you'd send them to me or questions, we'll make sure we get responses for you by the next meeting. Title 9 is the second one that we're going to touch on, and this one's fairly quick. Title 9, we have the health, that generally is health related. Title 1 or Chapter 1 of that is the health regulations, referring to the administrative codes that we use for our inspection program for our health inspections. Title 1 deals with the tattoo parlors and the swimming pools and the other ones that we have to inspect by state law. Title 3 is actually the nuisance section. Once again, this is one that's used frequently. It has got a lot of wear and tear over the years, and it includes the area where we talk about what is a nuisance and how you handle them and how you provide for service to property owners to abate nuisances, what the process is involved if they don't do what they're supposed to do, the penalties associated with that, and has a language in there about their right to appeal, not only to you folks, but on to district court if that's what they decide they want to do, if they want to resist it. And you all had occasion to be through that. One of the changes in this is one of the nuisances that is defined in here is a Dutch elm disease. Now, most of us can remember that when that was a big issue in Iowa, but we added, or I've added, subject to your approval, a section there dealing with the emerald ash borer. And if we have an infestation of that we would qualify that as a nuisance in our ordinance. So keep that in mind, whether you want to have that or not. But I think it makes some sense if we have some kind of a state order to move forward, that we can use this as a way to deal with it as a nuisance, public nuisance. Go ahead.
Under 932 definitions, it says under junk and obsolete cars, I used to allow if you had a car you were trying to keep for whatever purpose that wasn't licensed and so forth, rather than necessarily having a fitted cover, they allowed to have a blue tarp or something thrown over it, and this outlaws the use of blue tarps.
And it has since the last amendment to
Temporary covers.
the nuisance ordinance, which was done by an outside group in consultation with the city a number of years ago now. I don't have that in front of me, but that was removed, and here's why. We had folks that were just throwing a blue 98-cent tarp over a vehicle. What we're saying is if you have a vehicle and you truly care for it, it has a value, put a fitted car cover on it. Don't throw something out there that's flopping in the breeze and isn't designed for that use, and the weather gets to them and all the other things. So if it's important to you, show it's important, put a fitted cover on it so we know it has some value to you. The other ones, as we said, we've had poor history with those blowing away, or they take them and use them for some other thing, or if they know you're coming down for an inspection, they throw it over the top of it and say, we've complied, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So.
okay, thanks.
But it does go through a number of those and defines a different one. So I think it's good for you to look through there, because we have a number of different things we do call nuisances, up to and including buildings, abandoned buildings, and those kinds of things, and what the qualifiers are for that. It's in this particular title.
So how do we know what you actually altered and what you didn't?
There's very little in here that's been altered other than the emerald ash borer that you see, and the references in here, and some of the numbering We've cleaned up some of the language, but it's editorial, Phil. There hasn't been any significant changes with the exception of the emerald ash borer that I just referenced.
Yeah, so the color coding you have here, gold, it means what? And green and blue and,
Those are simply for our reference going forward. I can't remember the color code exactly. Well,
that's okay, I just,
those are for our reference going forward so that we can make sure that if there's issues we still need to address or citations we want to link or that we want to confirm.
okay.
those
That's
are
why
for-
the Iowa, Code of Iowa is
Yes.
in gold, so that,
Yes.
We
wanna
want to
make
make sure that, you know, that particular section of the state code still applies to this. As we do where we might be referenced in other sections of the city code in this, we want to make sure when we're done with this and we renumber them, when we have renumbered some of these, that they still match up. So it's kind of a trigger for everybody to check those.
okay.
The weed section is located in this chapter as well. The weed section, everybody's familiar with. The snow section for snow removal is similar, but it is located under that other area under Public Works with snow removal. So that is really the extent of 8 and 9. You do not have 10, I think Greg alluded to that. That's the zoning ordinance because as many of you know, Andrew has been working on that based on the adoption of the new comprehensive plan, and when that's completed and he's going through the chapters, he's got about 26 draft chapters now. When that's completed, he'll be bringing that forth like he did the comprehensive plan for your review. But that is a wholesale rewrite. There's significant changes to that. As you know, our original one was dated July 19th, 1973, so it's a bit out of date. So this is an opportunity to bring that up to date with the new comprehensive plan. And unless there are other questions, that's all I have for you this evening.
Right. As you do go through the code, if there are questions that come up, shoot myself, Steve, Nancy an email, and then we'll make sure to include those in the next agenda packet.
Do it
Anything,
quickly.
Counsel?
Do it quickly for some of us.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet.
Okay, council, item number 4 is a request to approve use of city streets for the MDA boot drive. And simply put, is there a motion to approve use of city streets for an MDA boot drive?
I so move.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Second, Mike. Discussion.
Well, I'm not quite sure what has changed from last year to this year, with the exception of trying to come up with some alternative. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not in favor of this. We put this out with an insurance, a requirement of insurance and so forth. And if you're a 503c, whatever, you're a nonprofit, putting requirements on that, spelling them out might get you into a situation that it might be a not-for-profit, might be charitable, but it may not be a charitable organization that you really want in the city of Muscatine. I can't specifically cite what that would be, but you're opening the door, I think. I think the opportunity has been, or the offers have been out there for the firefighters to do this off the city streets. Numerous locations. I think they should take this year and try it rather than doing it on the street.
One of the compromises the fire department has agreed upon, they're going to test doing it at Walmart in addition to the street corners, and Walmart has approved it.
But that's two. They're going to be using 2 street corners and Walmart. In the past, they've had 2 street corners.
That's right.
Previously, they had 3, if I remember correctly. There may have been 3 back a few years.
Greg, you want to summarize the last correspondence you got from our attorneys?
Certainly, and which kind of brings up the 2 comments that were made momentarily ago, street corners. I guess we really need to clarify, are we talking in the middle of the street or are we talking on the street corner? As the city's attorney notes in his opinion, this activity cannot be held in the street. It can be held on the street corner. and in compliance with city and state code. If you allow it in the middle of the street, it's in violation of both city code and the state code, but it can be done in the right-of-way.
But the
If
right-of-way would be, they'd have to be on the curb?
They have to be on the curb. It's just, I know folks don't like to make the correlation with panhandling, but as you know, panhandlers have been an issue for us, and they can stand in the right-of-way and ask for proceeds. And we cannot do anything about it unless they do one of two things. They stick a sign in the right-of-way, into the ground, or they step into the street. And at that point in time, they can be cited by the police department. So it's clearly a violation of city and state code to be in the middle of the street. If we allow it, we're in violation of code, we're assuming the risk, we're allowing for a $2 million insurance proceeds, but we're certainly increasing our risk and our liability should something happen.
The plan is to do it as they always have and has done in about 3,500 towns across America, and that's in the street.
Disregarding the law.
Civil disobedience, Mr. Mayor.
But this council is being asked to authorize that civil disobedience.
I don't think they are. I don't know if
Well,
they
the
are.
council doesn't have the capacity to waive code. We can't do that.
no.
State code. We can change our own code.
Yeah.
And I believe that's what part of this issue is. It's more than just approving an application to solicit. It's also a matter of modifying code. So I guess that's the first question is, I don't see this happening unless we agree to modify our own code, because I'm not in favor of
Right.
breaking our own rules. That doesn't make any sense to me.
No?
Then there's the issue of state code. I don't know how you get around that. I do have a concern when I looked at the insurance information. If we have a $2 million insurance policy, and I looked at the declarations, it's really a $2 million aggregate. It's a $1 million per occurrence when you look at the coverage. And I have not seen the policy. All I've seen is the deck page. But I do have a concern that if the council were to authorize an act in spite of state code, that may very well invalidate any protections we have under the insurance policy.
We can
I've
find
been
out.
around the business long enough to see that happen.
I think it's-
You can't do an illegal act and still expect to be covered by the indemnification clause. So
Mayor,
I think that's, if I could respond just to that one piece, I
Sure.
think the city attorney outlays that in the opinion.
Yeah.
And by noting that we're increasing our risk. If we disregard city and state code, we're increasing our liability, increasing our risk should something happen.
And insurance, yeah, set aside the whole issue of liability. Insurance is nothing more than a risk management tool. It doesn't prevent anybody from getting hurt. It doesn't prevent anybody from filing a lawsuit. I'm the last one to want to see anybody get hurt.
Mayor, someone asked the proposed locations. The memo says 8th and Cedar in Muscatine, Cleveland and 2nd Avenue in Muscatine. Proposed dates, August 27th, 28th, 29th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. There'll be 8 to 10 members doing their thing, collecting funds. One thing that I had questions last year for, all that money stays within the community. They also have a policy that MDA covers. I'm not sure what the amount of that insurance policy is,
That's the $2 million we're talking about.
Yeah.
but again, that's
MDA provides it.
correct.
But what I'm saying is that if we intentionally disregard law, you're not going to be covered.
Yeah, it's the
can't do it.
taxpayers of Muscatine that are on the line then. And I would like, this discussion actually isn't about the merits of MDA.
No, not
I think
at all.
everybody agrees 100%.
Sure.
The MDA is a wonderful organization, does wonderful things. The issue is, do you want to violate state law, and then therefore, as Tom's mentioning, basically you might as well just turn your insurance policy over and throw it out the window, because you don't have any.
Tom, would you look at, do you have before you okay, 5-14-1, number 2, then go down to paren 3. A request, whether vocalized or not, for a donation or contribution other than in response to an inquiry, blah, blah, blah. We could suspend that for the 3 days. That's city code. And that would, I hope,
Well, I don't believe we should suspend code at all. And it's interesting, just before I came to the meeting tonight, I got a call from somebody about this issue, and it is a person who is at home, you know, specifically because he has muscular dystrophy. And his attitude was that if we're going to do something like this, the opportunity should be available for all charities, not just one charity. So you pass code, you don't make exceptions, you just apply the same rule to everybody. So I'm not in favor of waiving it for 3 days. We either take it out of the code, you know, eliminate the issue, or we don't do it. So, but I think we can fix local code. That doesn't fix state code. None of us have the capacity to do that. Right. So how do we get around that? The only way around it is to solicit from the right-of-way.
that, I don't know that that's in state code, about the donation, requesting a donation.
What you can't get around is paragraph 2 of the legal opinion, which indicates that once you step into the traffic, that's where you're in violation. You can do it from the right of way, and I think that's the simple compromise and the simple solution. It's just that you require whatever entity is asking for permission to do this to simply do it from the right of way. We don't live in the time. We don't have hand crank windows anymore. You got a button. You push the button, you put the boot in the window, and you're good to go. You stay in the right of way. It's very simple. It avoids the issue. It preserves the insurance. It removes the risk. I think it's a reasonable compromise. As to other folks wanting, or other groups wanting to do this, I had somebody stop in my office saying, "What's going to happen with this tonight? Because I sure would like to get in on this if it passes." So you know we're going down a slippery slope if we allow it. So I think it's a simple
If you're going to
solution.
allow it, you allow it for all charities,
Right.
not just
If
one.
they have the insurance, why not?
Exactly. But that brings up a broader issue, and this was pointed out to me earlier this week. We passed a temporary policy allowing for street dining, and we actually have 2 decks perched out in the middle of a city street where people are selling food and alcohol serving for profit. What are the insurance requirements that we apply to that, if any? And I don't know the answer to that offhand. I think we did all of these things with the best of intentions, but it starts to get more complicated when you start raising those issues. Now, you could build a case that we said, well, we're really closing off a part of the street. There are barricades and planters and all those kinds of things, but that still doesn't prevent anybody from having an accident. But that's really a side issue. The question is, how do we accommodate a longstanding tradition for a worthwhile charity without breaking the law and without taking unnecessary risk? That's what we need to agree on if we're going to do anything.
And you can't, like you mentioned before, you don't want to make it specific to one organization. No. Anybody that meets those guidelines, they're a not-for-profit, they have the insurance, they have this, X, Y, and Z. You're not going to be able to say no.
Right. Agreed.
And we had an organization that requested to use Weed Park quite a number of years ago. And I think they were coming to town to have an organizational meeting. I won't mention the organization. They are mostly in the South. They wanted to use Weed Park in the city of Muscatine. The request came to council, and it was, come on, if you want to use it, fill out the appropriate paperwork, and then they never came because there wasn't an issue. But you're going to have people coming with their not-for-profit, and not all people having a nonprofit organization are really truly out there for nonprofits. They're gonna be collecting and it's gonna be open season, the way this is written, because you've opened the door. You get X, Y, and Z, boom, you got the permit.
Greg,
Yes,
do you foresee, if they agreed to the right-of-way, that it could happen?
I don't think it's a question whether or not firefighters agree to the right-of-way. I think it's simply that going forward, we adopt the ordinance and we allow it in the right-of-way, which is allowed by city code, which is allowed by state code, and problem solved. It's not that difficult to roll your window down on the right side and put your boot through the window. I think it's a simple solution, and it works for the fire department, for the fire union. It works for others that wish to do it. We're covered, according to the city attorney's opinion.
But it sure doesn't.
Problem solved.
Doesn't eliminate panhandlers setting out on the corner.
Doesn't
at Second.
eliminate panhandlers, but we can't do anything about it
That's
as it
a
is.
separate issue, it has nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
Well,
The state code just
similarities.
says you don't want people walking upon the roadway.
Yes,
And that's what we're doing if we let them in the center of the street.
Right.
yeah.
which street is Cleveland? Is
Right
that the
outside
one?
the Sunmart.
Right out in front of Hy-Vee, Second and Cleveland.
I mean, Hy-Vee, excuse me.
We're building our new bank building out there, Cleveland and Second.
Okay,
Hy-Vee, and then there's Team,
yeah, yeah.
another corner.
So the reality is, and I'd have to check, I mean, yes, Cleveland Street is there, but I suspect most of the activity is going to be in Hy-Vee's parking lot.
Well, yeah, so why
That's not
not
a
just
city street.
move 50 feet into Hy-Vee parking lot?
Well, I like the idea of using Walmart and Hy-Vee myself. The parking
agree.
lots.
Anyone else, council? Okay, let's make this a roll call vote.
Well,
Let's-
somebody
let's hear
clear
the
for me
motion.
what we're voting on.
Yeah.
Are we,
Okay, the request is to approve the use of city streets for MDA boot drive.
is that,
How does
Details the
that
right-of-way.
state code,
no?
individuals walking in the roadway, let me ask a question if I may, Mr. Mayor. All the 5Ks and the 2Ks and marching from St. Mary's to St. Matthias and 50 other things.
They closed the street, I think.
Pardon me?
I think they closed the street for that event.
Right.
For the 5K runs and 2K runs, they just shut down all the streets for the afternoon?
Pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
Needless to say, I've never been
There
on
are
one.
police on the corners. You know, I've tried to turn down Cedar Street and I got stopped and had to go another way. There was a bunch of guys running by, you know. So,
Well,
Yeah.
here what I would recommend, on this here, would like to amend the motion here to request approval of the use of the right-of-way of city streets to the MDA boot drive.
To limit it to the right-of-way?
Correct.
Now, is there any other, like, code change, and anything else that we're
think-
allowing here?
I think that's where I'm at with it is I'm willing to go along with this, but all of these code changes need to be adopted as well.
Yeah. and
That's part of this.
Could I simply suggest that you incorporate the additions to the code in the motion, and then I will bring forward the actual code for adoption.
Okay?
The requirements as listed in the proposed changes, include that as your motion, your amended motion, and then we will bring the code through the formal adoption process.
But that takes 3 readings.
Right, but I'm saying that your motion for approval includes the right-of-way and the
It's subject to-
requirements as
to the
listed
code
in the
requirements
proposed
changing.
change.
So it's all subject to the code approval, and if the code approval doesn't get,
No. That it's subject to the conditions as laid out in the proposed code changes. And then I will bring that forward for approval at a later date.
and what if it doesn't pass? They still get to do the boot drive?
They get to do,
What code
subject to those
Based-
conditions.
Based on these
Subject to those
conditions.
conditions.
Any of the
I know,
readings
I
of the
mean,
code
it's
change be
The ones that
waived?
he's talking about, yeah,
All that.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Can any of the readings be waived on the code?
Yes.
How many?
You can
can adopt
waive
the first reading.
after,
I'm sorry?
You can adopt it after the first reading.
you can waive the second and third reading.
Okay.
Could.
What about next year?
We're not gonna talk about
That's,
this next year.
that's a different
We
story.
said that last year.
No, but
Yeah, we tried that.
Yeah, I mean,
No, but
Didn't
once
work.
you change the code, we have a policy. It's a simple matter of the affected party filing an application for the permit,
right,
and the permit is issued.
You're okay with that, Tom, and you're okay with that, Greg?
yes,
But it
going
would appear
forward,
that the fire department is not.
they're subject to the conditions of the motion. If they choose not to do so and do it on private property, that's their
I
choice.
think we can, I think we can live with that. Amazing how jaywalking has gone up the scale to the felony. Got meth labs, gangs,
I don't think
drug
it's a felony,
problems, and this is about jaywalking.
Okay, you want to read the motion back again?
Motion is to approve the request, subject to the use of the right-of-way, not the traveled portion of the street, and subject to the conditions as outlined in the proposed code.
Okay, are you good with that?
Yes.
And Mike, are you good with that?
Yes.
Any more discussion? Okay, I'm going to make this a roll call, beginning with Bob.
Aye.
Osama?
Aye.
And
Nay.
Phil? Mike?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And Jeanette?
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. Okay, let's move along to item number 5, comments, beginning with Councilman Raywalt.
Where, I think Osama, what, 2-3 meetings ago, asked for, look into private contractors doing the residential garbage collection. Where are we with that? What have we learned?
We have not moved very far in that. However, we are meeting tomorrow with Bill Trent in preparation for the committee meeting next week on the 15th to begin that process. And then we'll be bringing those discussions forward. We haven't made much movement on that.
So nothing's
to
been
date.
done?
No, nothing to
When
date.
will something be done? We know the number of stops, we know the tonnage, we know the average pickup. That's what any contractor is going to be curious about.
Right. We'll have to work with Allied or other local contractors to provide an estimate. We should have something in a couple months.
Couple of months?
Yes.
Well, realistically, you're not gonna do anything until you adopt the next budget.
Well, we weren't looking for a bid, we were just looking for comments from contractors, what it might cost. I'll have something for you next week.
Nothing.
Anything else, Mike?
No,
Phil?
thank you.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Osama?
I have nothing, thank you.
Nothing tonight, Charter.
Jeanette?
Nothing, thank you.
And Tom?
Nothing, Your Honor?
Greg?
Just real quick, reminder, 3 o'clock Tuesday, we'll have an open house for Steve. He must retire after nearly 37 years with the city. And if you haven't already, I would encourage you to look at the Cedar and Iowa Street railroad crossings and the damage that the Canadian Pacific has done to those crossings and the inability to access the riverfront. We are working with IDOT and trying to get CP to the table, but Cedar Street especially is thoroughly damaged, and that was about $300,000 2 years ago to put in those concrete crossings, at-grade crossings.
We paid for that, didn't we?
We paid for 20%, the state paid for 60%, and the railroad paid for 20%.
And they came in and tore it all out.
Came up, tore it out, did not notify the city, did not notify the state, just came in and did it.
Why?
But it's in
question.
railroad right-of-way, technically, right? So
But
they
they still-
technically own it?
They still have to comply with
State.
state
I'm
with
sure
with
we have an
codes. They
easement.
have to comply with ADA requirements. They still have all of those requirements to comply with.
Yeah.
And we cannot presently access our property, which they are required to provide.
We had those machines down there going back and forth. to figure out what the
Can
hell
we,
they're doing.
can we get an injunction and then park a semi across the railroad so they can't use the line?
That's worse than jaywalking.
Anything else, Greg?
Maybe the boot drive needs to be down on the railroad.
$300,000 destruction of city property certainly sounds like a felony to me.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
All right, very good. And I have nothing. Is there a motion to
So
approve?
moved.
Meeting is adjourned.
Steve, what are we doing with this?
Thank you.